Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining me. This is just a quick update, and it's really based around my upcoming piece of work, a presentation that I'm doing based on a hypothesis paper. And this is the hypothesis paper, Potential Impact of SARS-CoV-2 Spike Protein on HIV Reservoir in People Living with HIV. And this stood out to me because I knew straight away that this was an important concept to try and explain what we may be seeing happening around us all the time. And so it has caused me to put together this presentation on can spike protein reactivate HIV. And this is not just about HIV, however, it is really about the myriad of viral infections that are latent. And the question is whether or not the spike protein, specifically with vaccines, can reactivate latent viruses. So this is a big topic, and so I don't want you to underestimate how important it is. And part of the hypothesis that is put forward here is that there are certain soluble factors, which I'll go through in more detail in the presentation, that can influence cells that have latent HIV in them that may have already been suppressed. And so the question should then become, is this possible with other latent viruses? And so straight away, once you understand that point and you reflect on it, you start to find relevant information. And so what I've got here is a paper that was from actually 2022. And this was real world evidence from over 1 million COVID-19 vaccinations is consistent with reactivation of the varicella zoster virus. So this is shingles. This is a study that was done in Germany. And again, I'll be covering that in some more detail in the presentation. But it's just so that you understand that this is real. This is not a conspiracy. This is not just a hypothesis. This has some real world evidence that goes behind it. The bigger question is, why do we see these unusual patterns? And in this paper, as their hypothesis, they were looking at the incidence of herpes zoster was assumed to be significantly higher in subjects who had received the COVID vaccine versus the unvaccinated. That was their hypothesis. That's what made them put the paper together. And there's part of the first question is, were they right? Did you see an increase in terms of varicella zoster or shingles? And if you don't understand, you have chicken pox as a child usually. That's with skin rash. It's a bit itchy. It's not too serious, which is why they used to have chicken pox parties. They're now using vaccines to try and minimize the risk. But when you then have the varicella zoster virus, that's for chickenpox, it then can stay latent for a lifetime. And it takes certain specific patterns to reactivate it, sometimes stress, trauma, which we'll go through. And so the question was whether or not COVID vaccination could cause a reactivation of the latent virus. So it's usually the older cohort when their immune system is not as strong. And here we have, consistent with the hypothesis, they found a higher incidence of herpes zoster, HZ, was statistically detectable post-COVID-19 vaccine. So when they looked at it and they looked at a broad population, this wasn't a small study. So if anybody is trying to refute it, you can realize that in Germany, they used a pretty big study here. They were looking initially at 21 million subjects. They split it into two cohorts. Cohort 1 of 1 million who had received a COVID vaccine. Cohort 2, those who didn't. Nice and simple. They matched them so that they have similar comorbidities, ages, and so on. And the question, therefore, is what was the outcome from that study? And remember, this was in 2022. This was at the time where saying anything like this could have been absolutely suppressed, which is probably why nobody really heard about this, because this was such an important paper. And when you look at the outcomes here, COVID-19 vaccine, patients in the cohort, 1,095,000. 2,200 had herpes zoster, shingles. No vaccine. Matched cohort, 1,223. Now, these are small numbers, but it shows that it's almost double the risk of reactivation. That was a pretty important paper at the time. And now what we're finding is that the paper on HIV is potentially giving us the answer as to why this may be. Because the premise is, if, as in this paper here, they are proposing that the mRNA vaccine specifically can influence surrounding cells to impact on cells that have latent HIV to then start producing virus. If this can happen in this case, why could it not also happen in multiple other viral infections? As we said, we've seen it there with regards to shingles. What about cytomegalovirus, CMV, Epstein-Barr virus as well, herpes viruses? All of these are relevant. And therefore, what are the implications going forward? And this is what I'll be talking about. So if you're interested in it, even if you are at risk, what can be done to try and mitigate the risk? Because what I'm finding is that in order for that to happen, there are about 5 steps that have to all align. If you can just knock one of those out, you can significantly reduce your risk. Or if it's the risk of a loved one. And this is why sometimes looking carefully at the science, looking carefully at understanding the mechanisms, gives us an opportunity to try and find strategies to overcome what could be quite a significant impact longer term. You have to remember that even with shingles, the reason why the shingles vaccine is being promoted so much at the moment is because it does statistically reduce the risk of shingles. But when you think about the fact that so much of the population has been exposed to spike protein, and believe me, I'll show you in the presentation that it's not just vaccination, but also infection, the combination of the two. So if people who have been vaccinated are getting reinfected all the time, that is a cumulative risk for reactivation of the shingles virus. And so when you add all that together and you realize that the shingles vaccine, by reducing the reactivation of varicella zoster, reduces the risk of dementia, you then have to just put it the other way, that if you have a mechanism that increases the risk of shingles, therefore, in theory, that cohort of the population will have a higher risk of dementia. And so it's that kind of discussion that we really need to have. What are the current population risks? What, if anything, can be done to mitigate those risks? Those are the kinds of questions that need to be answered. So this is just a quick discussion. Join me. The link is in the description below. We are looking not just at HIV, but we're looking at multiple other viruses and looking at what it means if multiple viruses are reactivated, what kind of disease presentations, and critically, if you are at risk, what can you do to try and mitigate it? Thank you for listening. Look forward to speaking with you in more detail in the upcoming webinar on Thursday, the 5th of February. If you've missed it, look for the link in the description. It will be hopefully attached to the course that will come along with it. Have a great evening.
A hero, an immune adventure, Humming Heroes, your lyrical guide to the body's defenders. Now on Amazon. Check the links below.